So I started right over there in '92, and Gary and I came in together. And if there's a competition for marrying over your head, I'm going to enter you. So Gary's been a great friend for a long time, and to all of my colleagues here, thanks for public service. It's billed as a citizen legislator. It is. When I first got here, I got the first paycheck, and I thought there was a mistake. It's $10,400 part-time job. It's really a full-time job. And so I want to thank you all for serving. In '94, when I got elected with the Contract with America class, one of the 10 things that we put in the Contract with America, if we took over as Republicans, is to have a vote on a balanced budget amendment. And the reason we put it there is it's popular. And if nothing else, we can read a poll. So Bob, the balanced budget amendment is needed today more than it was in 1994. Just look at the numbers. So I voted for a balanced budget amendment that passed the House in '95 by well over 2/3. It went to the United States Senate in 1995, and it got 66 votes, one short of what was necessary, and my good friend Senator Hollings changed his vote. But having said all that, the issue is necessary to change this chart. You can put Republicans in charge of the Congress in perpetuity. This chart is not going to change until the Congress legally has to get the debt in order, because it's so hard to get 60 votes in the United States Senate to limit spending. And I believe the filibuster has done more good than harm. So if we take back the Senate in 2022 as Republicans, I'm going to insist that one of the first votes we take is on a balanced budget amendment. I want to put everybody on record to start a conversation throughout the country. Senator Schumer is never going to allow a vote on the balanced budget amendment because it would limit the ability of the federal government to be everything to everybody. It would tie us up in terms of spending money. We'd have to do something on entitlements to save Medicare and Social Security. But without a balanced budget amendment or a convention of the state, neither party will be able to change that chart. If we had a balanced budget amendment in 1995, that chart would not be the same. The average South Carolinian has $240,000 of federal debt on their shoulders with no end in sight. So I'm not here to blame one party over the other, but I am here to say that the Republican Party is for a balanced budget amendment and the Democratic Party is AWOL. And my hope is that at the state level, we can make it clear to members of Congress what they should be doing. I have gotten your message loud and clear. The House passed legislation overwhelmingly to put South Carolina in the column of doing one of two things. And I really don't care how we do it as long as we do it. The convention of the state approach of the states requires 34 states to call for a convention. Then we can talk about term limits, talk about anything you want to talk about, but the balanced budget needs to be part of that conversation. So that's one approach. The other approach is to have 33 states say that if you passed a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, we would ratify it. So when you get 33 states, that tells Congress it's time to pass it as a balanced budget amendment standalone proposition. If you get 34 states calling for a convention, then the states can make Congress do what we're failing to do. So you're doing the Lord's work. Young people today have a lot on their shoulders. We're going to become Greece as a nation if we don't turn this around. It's going to require compromise. No one party is going to save Medicare and Social Security. I've been talking about we live longer. We may have to delay retirement for a year or two like we did with Social Security to keep these programs from failing. Those in my income level may take a little less and pay a little more to keep Medicare and Social Security solvent. Right now, 70% of all the money we spend is mandatory spending. Medicare, Social Security, all these entitlement programs are eating up the entire federal budget. So that chart gets worse over time. The only thing that will change that chart is for the states, through a state convention process, convention of the states, or enough states step forward to say we would ratify a balanced budget amendment to make us do it. So the one thing I do want to leave you with here is if Republicans take charge of the United States Senate, I will do everything in my power to make sure we have a vote on a balanced budget amendment of the Constitution. We may not get 67, but we're going to have a vote, and you can find out where the problems are. So to my State House colleagues, South Carolina is one of the best places in the nation to raise a family and start a business. The government is on your side if you're a business person here. If you're trying to raise kids, we're on the side of the parents. And when it comes to taking good care of your money, I think the State House, House and Senate has done a darn good job of making sure we have the infrastructure we need to grow, but do it in a way not to put the next generation in debt. People are moving to this state in record numbers for a reason. It is a great place to raise a family and to start a business. And my goal as your senator in Washington is to be part of the solution to the best I can. I hear what you're telling me about Washington, and I totally agree. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Graham. Thanks for being here. Glad you have a little bit of a break so that you could be down here. We all feel a lot safer when you and your colleagues are at home and not in Washington. But I appreciate your advocacy on this issue. Appreciate you bringing attention to it so that we could have some time to talk about it. Now I want to introduce Mr. Loren Enns. Loren is the president of the National Campaign for the Balanced Budget Amendment. He spent the last 9 years or so traveling around the country advocating for a balanced budget amendment in different states, and he's had some success, and I'm hopeful that he's going to have some success here as well. Loren?
Well, thank you, Majority Leader Massey. My name is Loren Enns. I run the National Campaign for a Balanced Budget Amendment to the United States Constitution. It is truly an honor to be here with Senator Graham, with Speaker Lucas, and Majority Leader Massey to bring more attention to this critical national issue. At over $29 trillion at the end of fiscal year 2021, we paid $562 billion to service the U.S. national debt. With that money, we could have purchased a fleet of 46 aircraft carriers. We could have paid off half of the U.S. consumer credit card debt, or we could have put 5.5 million high school seniors through 4 years of college. Clearly, the situation is out of control. Fortunately, we have 27 of the 34 states required to call a convention to propose a balanced budget amendment for ratification, and we need South Carolina to be on the map as number 28. Now, there is no person that I would rather have leading on this issue to carry the torch at both the national level and the Palmetto State as Senator Graham. Over the years, a number of famous Republicans have led on this issue. Those names start with Reagan, Dole, Gingrich, and now Graham. I want to thank the South Carolina General Assembly for taking up this issue. I'd like to thank Speaker Lucas for being a friendly Article 5 atmosphere in the House. I would also like to thank Senator Massey for being our long-term faithful advocate in the Senate. And to close, I'd like to quote Ronald Reagan, who is really the father of this campaign. When Ronald Reagan was asked, why should the American people support this campaign? And he replied, if not now, when? If not us, who? That was when the national debt was only $2 trillion, 1/15 the size that it is today. So once again, I'd like to thank Senator Graham for leading on this issue, helping us in our efforts to return financial sanity, fiscal sanity to Washington. Thank you.
right, those are all our speakers, so I will open up if anybody has any questions.
So, what does Senator Graham think the prospect of the vote is if we were to get a vote? Like, how much support is there for it?
Well, a vote like this changes when you hear from your constituents. So let's say we take over in 2022, and the majority leader, who's a Republican, says, in the early spring, we're going to have a vote on a balanced budget amendment. What would happen is that these groups would weigh in really heavily, and it would call a lot of attention to the issue. So I can't tell you what the vote would be today, because there's been no effort to sell the product. But I can tell you with the American people, it's a 70% issue. 70% of the American people want to change this chart. With a 60 vote requirement, there will never be legislation to reform entitlements or to change spending in a way necessary to change the curve. If you had a balanced budget amendment requiring us legally to change this chart, we would have to. And I would say this, without a balanced budget constitutional provision in South Carolina, things would look differently, because they have no out. They have no, I can always blame the Democrats, they can blame me. They have no buck to pass, because the law requires them to do what most people do in their average everyday lives, makes the checkbook balance. I'm in a business where writing a bad check, you don't go to jail. So the bottom line is we need to bring that sense of accountability that the American people live under to Washington, that's worked well in the states who've adopted the constitutional approach. I do believe that if we make this a topic for 2022 and 2024, we have a very good chance of passing a balanced budget amendment, because this chart only gets worse over time. And I was in Congress where it fell by a single vote. My goal, and I don't think I'm going to make it, to Strom's age, is to have another shot at this thing in my political lifetime, to go do it again and get it right.
The other option in terms of convention of states, you mentioned lots of things to be talked about if we have a constitutional convention. Are you worried that you may get things you don't want?
I worry about a lot of things. The one thing I know is insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If you don't take some risk, this chart's going to change and we're going to lose our ability as a nation to function. Had I prefer a standalone balanced budget approach? Yes. Will I support a convention of the state approach? Yes, because doing nothing is going to make this chart go the wrong direction. So the better approach, I think, would be for Congress to pass a balanced budget amendment ratified by 33 states. But I don't see that happening right now, so keep the pressure on us. And if it takes a convention of the states to get us to the fiscal promised land, count me in.
Senator Graham, while we have the opportunity, could you just give us a comment on your take on the Russian situation?
Yeah. So I had a conference call yesterday with about 8 or 9 senators to try to come up with an agenda next week that would send a message to Putin that the cost of going into the Ukraine is going to be greater, not less, for Russia. I do believe there's growing bipartisan support to put sanctions on Putin and his buddies right now. Don't wait for the invasion. They're destroying the Ukrainian economy. They're throwing Europe into chaos. Sanction him now for the provocation. That's my approach. Most Democrats want to do it after he invades. I think that's too late. I totally support sending 8,500 troops to our NATO allies in the region, because one of the reasons Putin is doing this is try to get NATO to back off Well, the signal I want to send is we're not going to back off. The more provocative you are, the more resolve we'll have for NATO. So send American and NATO soldiers around Russia to reinforce we're not giving an inch when it comes to NATO. I also will support a Lend-Lease agreement where we flow arms to the Ukraine in larger numbers, more sophisticated weapons, so they can defend themselves. The more dead Russians, if he invades, the more likely this thing will end sooner rather than later. So sanction him now, build up NATO, and do not give in to this bully. If we get Ukraine right, it can reset the world. If we get it wrong, God help Taiwan. Everybody is watching. This is a moment for NATO to show, as an organization, we're willing to stand up for our values. It's a chance for the world to tell bullies that in 2022, you don't take things because you can. The reason you want to put people in jail who loot stores is that nobody will stay in business if somebody can walk in your store and steal everything you got. You lose control of the streets. If you let Putin dismember the Ukraine, then you will set in motion the most destabilizing period since the 1930s. Thank you.